The Select Committee on Finance convened to consider the response by the National Treasury and SARS to the submission received on the 2026 fiscal framework and revenue proposals. Honourable members, this meeting follows the public hearing held earlier this week, which was chaired by Dr. Masangani, during which a range of stakeholders made submissions and responded to questions raised by members. We appreciate the continued engagement by all participants in this important oversight process. Again, our members further advise that pursuant to the written questions submitted by Honourable Suwisa, the National Liquor Trade has provided written response as agreed. The document has been circulated to members for their consideration and will form part of the meeting record. I hope those, since I'm on the Select Committee group chat, I've also received that, which has been confirmed by Honourable Sibisa. The purpose of today's meeting, honourable members, is to allow the National Treasury and SARS to formally respond to the submission received, after which stakeholders will have an opportunity to provide brief comments, followed by input from the Parliamentary Budget Office, that is the PBO, and engagement through questions and answers. Honourable members, I would like to remind all participants to observe the time allocation as set out in the agenda to ensure that the programs run smoothly. With that, can I request Dr. Mangweni, can you please flag the agenda?
Can you say it, Chairperson?
Yes, thanks very much. Can you now just go through the apologies?
Yes, Chair. From the side of the Select Committee on Finance, we have an apology from Honorable Majola. From National Treasury Chair, we got an apology from DG Dr. Peters. From the side of the stakeholders, we got an apology from Mr. Puvei. We were told by National Treasury that Mr. Edgar Shishi will be leading the delegation, but I do notice from the participants that the Minister has joined and the Deputy Minister, Chairperson. Thanks.
Okay. Is the Minister in our platform?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good morning, Honourable Minister and the Deputy Minister. My apologies for...
Good morning, Chair.
Yes, my apologies.
Good morning, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Honourable Minister. Good morning, and to also the DM. I'm also told that is also on the platform. Good morning, DM.
Good morning, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, DM. Let me now hand over to the National Treasury and SARS. I'd like to check who's going to start first. Is it the National Treasury?
Sorry, Chair, just apologies from Standing Finance.
Oh, my apologies. I thought Dr. Mangweni has made the apologies for both houses. Yes, Standing Committee.
Chair, it's Honourable Lekhanyane, Ms. Mukabela, Honourable Beasley, and Honourable Alexander, and also from the department, apology from DM Masando. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks very much. Can I check if there's the adoption of the apologies as has been presented? I don't want members who will say, no, we didn't accept those apologies because of some other things. Can I be assisted, members? Can I take it as a consensus that the meeting accept the apologies has been presented? Can I get a yes or a members?
Apologies accepted, Chair. Good morning, it's Lekwase.
Morning, Honorable Lekwase. Thank you very much. Apologies has been accepted. There's no objection in that regard. Can I now hand over to the National Treasury?
Thank you, Chair. The Minister's leading the delegation, so perhaps you might want to make some opening remarks.
Okay. No, it's fine. Thank you, Honorable Minister. And I'm handing over to you, Minister. Thank you.
Normally, these meetings are for National Treasury.
Yes.
And anomaly last year happened, that's why I'm here. An anomaly last year happened, you guys refused to accept them unless we're here. Which standard over the past 4 years, I've never been party to these meetings. So I'm here, but the department will present Edgar proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. And we appreciate your presence in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. And of course, as indicated, and for the purposes of the record, my name is Edgar Sishi. I am the Deputy Director General, National Treasury, responsible for the Budget Office, but I am the Acting Director General.
I'm not sure if it's on my side. I can't hear you, Mr. Shishi.
Also on my side, no sound.
Okay, no sound. Yes. Oh, no. Apparently, everyone can hear you. Mr.
The
Sishi.
screen seems to have frozen, Chair. If you can hear, maybe just to log out and back in.
Okay. Mr. Sishi, we can hear you. Maybe let's go to SARS, then they will come back as they are fixing their own technical glitches.
Sorry, Chair, I'm back.
Oh, are you back?
Yes, sorry, it was just I don't know what happened, but something happened.
Okay.
I was thrown out.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Chair, we can't see the presentation now.
Yeah, it's continuing. Mr. Sishi, can we now allow SARS to respond to the questions, and now you'll come back after SARS, please, because it seems we are not getting assistance from your side and nobody can hear you. Can I now hand over to SARS, please?
Honorable Chair, I don't know whether I'm audible. My name is Johnston Makubu. I am the Deputy Commissioner at SARS.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Makubu. Yes, you are audible enough, I think so.
Whilst Mr. Sishi is getting ready to come back on, there were a few issues that had arisen that relate to SARS. And in particular, we wanted to just clarify a couple. One of those issues that had arisen, and by the way, Chair, apologies on behalf of Commissioner Kisvete, who could not be able to join us this morning, but we are here to deal with the issues as I indicated. There were questions that arose in as far as the issues that pertain to debt are concerned. We would like to indicate that we are still pretty much en route to collecting the debt that we had aimed to collect. The committee will recall that the minister had set us an expectation of collecting around 135 billion rands, utilizing the 2 billion rands that we've been apportioned as part of the 7.5 billion rands that we had been given over the MTEF. I think it's important to indicate that whilst we have had some headwinds in terms of the collection of the debt, we have been on record in the past indicating that the complexity of the debt has continued to be challenging.
Chair.
Chair.
Mr. Makudu, can you flag the presentation, please?
No.
We were.
Who was it?
Chair. Chair.
No, Chair, we were going to respond.
Mr. Makudu, can I take your hands, please?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I raised my hand, but I could see that because my hand is beautiful, you might not see it. I'm sorry to disrupt the. Chair, Ntate Makubu says the commissioner is unable to be with us, but we don't exactly know what is the apology, because it's not his culture that it misses our meeting. It's always present in our meetings. So what happened today? Is he sick? If so, we will send him flowers and well wishes. But can you get his apology recorded properly, Chair?
Yes, there's an apology for Mr. Kisveter, and the Deputy Commissioner says they are here to do the presentation, Honorable Martin. What you want to hear is the presentation, the responses from SARS. I think the apology has been tabled to say that the Commissioner is not available, and they are here. What is important is the delegation is here to give responses.
Yes, we hear that, Chair, but he's not available. He's engaged somewhere else, or he's off sick, or how?
Mr. Makudu?
Chair, he's engaged on another commitment that he could not be able to get out of. And that is what we'd like to put on record. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you continue, Mr. Makubu?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I must also indicate that there was a request for a presentation. As it is normally tradition, we would have responded at the back of the presentation that National Treasury had circulated. So the aspects that I'm responding to are partly covered in the presentation that Mr. Sishi, the acting DG, would have spoken to. And therefore, we've not necessarily prepared a presentation. We were going to make a verbal submission, as I am doing in this regard. I was explaining, Chair, if you do allow, I was explaining that the questions that had arisen around the debt collection, we are of the view that we are, whilst we are having some headwinds in terms of the collections of the debt, we are still having about 2-3 weeks towards the financial year end, and we are pressing quite hard to make sure that we are able to reach a considerable ground in as far as our debt collection is concerned. And therefore, I think it suffices, Chair, that we do provide as part of our year-end reporting, which will come back to the committee to give a closeout report for our year-end in terms of where we ended up with the debt collection initiative. I think it's important also that I just indicate that in the debt collection work, we've had some headwinds. However, we do think that the work we've done in this financial year will put us in good stead in the new financial year to be able to continue to report progress in this regard. So it's not a sort of an in-year, one-year work. It is a multi-year piece of work that we continue to execute. We will report fully on this once the financial year has ended, but we are encouraged that the resources that we were given, around 690 of them that we put on board, we've been able to see around 12 billion rands that have come from those resources. However, we will provide a full report once the financial year has ended, Chair, particularly because we do know that our debt collection efforts tend to take a hockey stick effect, such that the month of March is the highest collection month of all the months that we have, 12 months that we have. So we would come back and report in that regard. We also saw that there was mention of the excise illicit trade work. The National Illicit Economy Disruption Program that was mentioned by the President in his State of the Nation address continues to be the anchor upon which we will continue to deal with the issues of the illicit economy, and not taking away from the work that SARS continues to pursue in as far as the illicit economy is concerned. You would have had the Commissioner immediately after budget talking to a 5-point plan that is part of that National Illicit Economy Disruption Program. And we are of the view that dealing with this matter at a consolidated level and moving away from the fragmented approach that up to now seemed to have been the approach, to try and ensure that we take an integrated approach across all the departments. We think that is the approach that will put us in a good position to be able to counter the scourge of illicit trade within our economy. And therefore, Chair, our response is that we will continue to collaborate with the other law enforcement agencies and other departments. And the Minister of Finance has convened a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the ministers in Defense, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Police, and there is guidance in terms of work that needs to ensue in that regard. We also want to just clarify, Chair, that the 7.5 billion that we had been allocated by the Minister had specific purposes amongst which to collect debt, but also to start to make headway around modernization. The committee will be aware that we have already published work around what we are doing in the Tax Administration 3.0, work that we are doing at SARS. And therefore, the 500 million that we got in this year, we've put into the initial stages of the Modernization 3.0 work that we're doing within the Tax Administration. There were questions that were asked around our debt book. We would like to report that of the 650 billion in debt that we have in our book as at the end of February, around 374 billion of that is undisputed, and 278 billion of that is disputed. And of course, even the undisputed debt, we continue as we roll out our collection efforts to face some challenges. Some of the entities are really hard pressed, and they are asking us to enter with them into deferred arrangements. And we continue to use provisions in law to ensure that those that owe money to the fiscus do account for those monies. And if we need to enter into deferred arrangements, we will assess their financial affordability and will make the right decisions accordingly. We do also want to flag, Chair, that as we work through our debt book, we are increasingly realizing that there is portions of our debt book that we need to impair and or write off. Amongst the reasons is that some of the people that owe us this money are deceased, and some of the entities that owe us this money are no longer in operation. And increasingly, like we would in any financial system, you'd recognize those as debts that must be impaired and ultimately written off. And we are of the view that as we report for this financial year, we will indicate how much of that debt needs to be considered for impairment and how much of it needs to be written off. And that will allow us to continue then to work impactfully on the actual debt that we will be taking into the new year, that we stand a better chance of collecting. But the work continues across our compliance program. Debt is a third of our compliance program. There's other work that SARS continues to do to ensure that we improve our compliance approach. Chair, I will stop here. The other issues may come up in Mr. Sishi's presentation, and we will come back to address those as and when they come up. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makubu. Are you fine now?
Yes, Chair, I think I'm fine. I do apologize.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. You can continue.
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I think part of my problem is connectivity because of the video. So as I present,
Yes, you
mind, I'll
can.
switch it on.
Yeah, you can switch it off. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. So Chair, we first of all want to acknowledge and appreciate the various contributions that have been made by many stakeholders that presented during this week in the public hearings. And in that regard, Chair, I do want to make a couple of points. The first is that, of course, the sheer volume of the questions, points, comments, etc., that were made requires more time to cover than is allocated for the meeting. For this reason, we have crafted this presentation with a main body which we are going to present on the floor today, and with annexures, which obviously we can't go through, that drill down in some of the granular details. We ask honourable members and stakeholders to take note of this and consider that we have not ignored any question that's been asked, and that to the extent that they can, if they go through all of the different parts of the presentation, they'll find that the answers have been given. The second thing that I want to point out is that National Treasury is deeply committed to public and stakeholder engagement. We conduct our own public consultations before and after the budget. And we have a whole unit in the Treasury that is dedicated to developing our public consultation processes. And so we really value these processes, and it includes some of the same stakeholders that are here. And finally, Chair, I do want to make the point that although we note that the agenda does not make provision for the Treasury to come back after the stakeholders have given their responses, we trust that the committee will give us some opportunity to ensure that the report of the committee includes any additional points that the Treasury would need to make to provide further clarity or correct any factual incorrect information at some point. Chair, I'm not going to go through each point in the slide. It's fairly self-explanatory, except to say that we obviously note that in addition to what I've already said, many of the submissions reflect very varying different kinds of opinions, some that contradict each other. People have different views on different aspects of the budget. And what we try to do, Chair and honourable members, we try to come together with a balanced approach. And that really is what the budget, among other things, tries to do. It's the balance between the economic and fiscal conditions, the constitutional requirements, which include taking into account the financial means of the state, as well as, of course, balancing the different views across the broad spectrum of the people in the country. Next slide. I can go to the next slide. Yeah. So, Chair, again, these are the key points in the budget, which I'm not going to repeat. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. The first is that although, of course, we have estimates in the budget, and I know this has been a topic in Parliament and for a while, we do nevertheless note, of course, that global events that have taken place since the budget will have an impact, particularly if the shock escalates and persists. We, and frankly, everyone else, have no idea how long the events that are taking place in the Middle East are going to persist. So we're all in the same boat in the sense of trying to understand that information. However, for our part, we're monitoring the situation carefully. We are actually already in a process of reviewing a number of things around this. But of course, if things end this week or next week, we don't know, and that could have an impact on what happens in that regard. In the meantime, the stabilization of debt is important because of what it means for the sustainable provision of public services. We are focused on higher investment and improving basic services. And for us, Chair, in the crafting of this budget, those are the two most important things. How do we make infrastructure, capital investment higher than anything else? And how do we improve the provision of basic services? And we have showed that in the budget, but we'll outline in greater detail as we go forward. And of course, we've spoken about reducing waste and making government more efficient. We'll also touch on that. Questions about affordability and the cost of living. The budget tries to make a contribution in this regard in many ways. And of course, one of the things we've emphasized are the withdrawal of tax increases that were previously planned and the adjustments to personal income tax brackets, as well as changes to tax thresholds and limits. These are real world important things that will have an impact. And of course, as I've already spoken about infrastructure and social services, this is the first budget, honorable members, honorable chair, this decade in which spending on infrastructure investment and on social services, including social grants, grows faster than debt service costs. For many years, we've been saying debt service costs are rising higher than anything else. But in this budget, that is not the case for the first time in a long time. I see this, for whatever reason, the screen's gone off, but I'm sure it'll come back. I see, Chair, it says the host has disabled screen sharing. So perhaps the secretary can help us with screen sharing. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. And then, Chair, the last thing I just want to indicate is the fact that I think it's important to be aware of the fact that South Africa has a very active and effective debt management strategy. We will show that in this presentation. And both our fiscal policy stance over the last few years and our debt management processes have meant that we've seen an improvement in South Africa's debt portfolio, including what we've seen with the credit rating upgrade, decline in bond yields, etc. So, in other words, to the extent that it's up to us, Chair, we have seen an improvement as a result of some of the measures that we've been putting in place to try and improve the situation. So, Chair, those are the sort of the first few slides. The next set of slides are going to be divided between the revenue, taxes and revenue side, expenditure, debt, as well as the division of revenue issues. So to start us off on the tax and revenue proposals, I'm going to ask Chris Axelson, the head of tax and financial sector policy in the Treasury, to quickly take us through that section. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Edgar. Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I'll try and go through the tax slides. The first issue is on the excise duties, both on alcohol and tobacco. There were a lot of submissions on this particular topic. As Edgar said, we get a lot of varying and diverse views, and that is the case here as well. The alcohol companies put forward strong proposals to say that the future increases should be in line with inflation and also should be linked to the level of the illicit market. There were non-profits and other NGOs who argued exactly the opposite, to say that the excise duties are too low and we need to work really hard to try and reduce the consumption of alcohol and reduce the harms to society and growth that come from higher levels of alcohol consumption. As we've shown and as we've done in this budget has an inflationary increase in the excise duties. This should hopefully maintain the effective duty rates. The proposals in terms of how to take this regime forward are really going to be discussed in the consultations. There were some commentators who said that we haven't been fully transparent in how we have done the excise duties. In the past, over the last 10 years, excise duties on alcohol and tobacco have been used as a mechanism to raise revenue. And we have been very open about that. There has been a guideline where we were trying to target the rated average retail selling price on those products. But we deviated from that guideline to raise revenue because we were going through a fiscal consolidation stage. Due to the concerns from industry and others about this deviation from the guideline, that led us to publish the alcohol discussion paper. We have started consultations on that just to get an overall view on the potential harms and what is the current state of play in the market. And we will continue with those consultations and workshops this year to try and see what the new regime could be. So we're not going to provide any answers today because we still need to consult, but we are looking at things such as minimum unit pricing. Should there be a tiered system? How do we tax wine versus beer, etc.? And at the moment, we have been adjusting for inflation in the meantime. If you go to the next slide, a big part of this is about illicit trade. And there've been a lot of discussions about the illicit market. And we've acknowledged that if you have an illicit market and it gets too large, it completely undermines the health objectives of the excise duty that we have in place. We need to try and reduce this illicit market as much as we can. We're trying to do that by providing some support to SARS through additional allocations. We were very glad to see the President announce in the recent SONA, the National Illicit Economy Disruption Program, and it's going to try and bring through all the stakeholders together to try and stop this illicit trade. We know that if the prices are too high, that illicit trade, the incentives to do that illicit trade are higher. And that is part of what we need to think about when we do excise duties. But we also want to reduce consumption of alcohol and tobacco, and that has been our standard. We also have been added some additional allocations to the Border Management Agency as well as Defence and SAPS from the CARA account to try and help with organised crime and enforcement of this. But it was spoken about previously by Deputy Commissioner Makubu. If we go to the next slide. There were a few comments about medical tax credits as well as retirement fund contributions and the increases there. In our view, we should be adjusting for inflation. The tax system should adjust for inflation over time. It had been a long time since we had made a lot of these adjustments because we had been going through a period of fiscal consolidation. We needed to try and raise revenue so that we could reduce slow the increase in debt to GDP. And we are finally getting to that point. And as the Minister says, we're getting to a turning point where hopefully that can be done. Because of that change and that turning point, there is now space for us to go back to the original objective, which is to increase all of these items by inflation. There were some comments that said this should just be a de facto change, and we recognize that and note that, and it should be the way that we change the tax system just to do some housekeeping, if you will, each year. So this medical tax credit, there were some comments to say that this is regressive. We do have a bit of an issue with that. Previously, it was a deduction, and just over 10 years ago, there was quite a big change to change the deduction to a credit. And if it's a credit, it's exactly the same value for every member, regardless of your level of income. So when we look at the actual data on who claims this medical tax credit, because now everybody gets the same value, over 60% of that credit is claimed by people who earn less than 500,000 Rand. So now how do you decide who is rich, who is high income, who is middle income? It's a difficult question to answer, but over 60% of those claims are from people earning less than 500,000 Rand. If you get rid of that, the medical tax credit, it will have a big impact on those earners. Because it is a credit, because it's the same value for each earner, those who are on much lower levels of income, that credit represents a much larger percentage of their income. So the example there is the 376 per month for someone earning 150,000 is about 3% of the income. Whereas for someone earning 1.5 million, it's only 0.3. And that was the benefit of using that credit. The way we do look at it as well is it's linked to this idea that we are already taxing personal income taxpayers at quite a high level. The chapter 4, the 2 paragraphs in that chapter try to explain what we believe is the level of the personal income taxes, and it is high. If you compare us to OECD countries, we're much higher than OECD countries in terms of the personal income tax that we collect, and it's on a very, very narrow base. there are not many taxpayers that are able to make that amount. And if you go back one to retirement funds, so on the retirement fund, this is a similar issue where we try to adjust for inflation, and we've adjusted it in line with the increases in the top personal income bracket, so it wasn't directly in line with inflation in order to be consistent with the benefits that higher incomes earners had received in terms of the changes to their personal income tax bracket. The big point to note here is that this is not a free deduction. It's not just a straight reduction in their tax, it's a tax deferral mechanism. So those individuals, even if they can contribute up to that cap, when they then receive that amount in retirement, they will pay tax on it. So it's not as if tax will not be paid or that we're giving it away for free. It is just a tax deferral. When the individual retires, they will be taxed. It is the opposite for other types of savings investments, where you pay your income tax, you contribute to a savings account or an investment account after tax has been paid, and then when you withdraw, you don't pay any additional tax. For these retirement fund schemes, you get an upfront deduction, so you don't pay income tax, but then eventually when you retire, you pay the tax at that point. We think it's an important mechanism to try and assist with savings, as well as the increase in the tax-free savings account limit in this budget. And savings are what we need to get the investment to try and grow the economy. We think tax does have an important role to play in changing individuals' behavior to save more and keep those funds within South Africa. You go to the next slide. There are a couple of points about the tax to GDP ratio, and also quite a few points about the fact that we need to enhance revenue mobilization. I think there's no arguing that we would like revenues to be higher so that we can fund important social expenditures. The trick is, how do you do that? And if you look at our tax to GDP charts, we are at a record high, and we are expected to go even higher. So it is not that we have been reducing the level of tax that we have been receiving. We are already at record highs, and it's going to be higher. But we also need the economy to grow. The best approach would be to grow the economy in such a way that the tax base expands and that tax to GDP gets higher and higher. And it will get higher, especially because with personal income tax, if we have a progressive personal income tax system, if that amount of income that is earned grows higher, and it usually grows higher than nominal GDP, then you will get these increases in tax to GDP. That needs to be considered when we look at all these other proposals for either, for example, scrapping medical tax credits, getting rid of retirement fund deductions and others. You need to look at it from a holistic perspective to see where we are in terms of the tax that we receive as an economy. And it is high, even though we would like it to be higher, but we can't easily raise taxes without having a negative impact on growth. If you go to the next slide. There are a couple of comments about commodity prices and mining revenue, both in terms of, do we have them sufficiently included within the revenue estimates? Just to give an idea, because there was also a question in a previous session about how much it would cost the economy if those mining revenues and the mining prices, commodity prices, suddenly dropped to a level that they were a year or two ago. So in December 2025, the CIT revenue collections were about 10 billion higher than in December 2024. The mining revenue collections were about 3.5 billion higher, so not that much higher. In terms of mineral royalties, they were also around 3 billion higher. We have got a slight increase in the revenue estimates for the 26-27 year of about 5 billion because of the high PGM prices and gold prices. So it is not exceptionally large in terms of what we have there. There is definitely potential for upside surprise because of the commodity price impact on revenue, although we have included some. The big point we wanted to make was that in the previous boom, the other commodity prices did increase. So coal and iron ore prices in 22-21 increased quite a lot. And we haven't seen those increases here. And when we look at the data, we did get additional revenue from coal and iron ore companies, which is unlikely to be the case this time around. Next slide. On the wealth tax, we've had calls from to introduce a wealth tax again. We've had these calls in a number of years. A couple of the commentators are saying that as Treasury, we are ignoring their comments. It is not that we are ignoring their comments. We have responded on this point about the wealth tax in every session that we have come to the Standing Committee on Finance. The Minister of Finance has also answered a parliamentary question where he puts out the views in detail. To reiterate those today, we believe that there are a lot of taxes that are already in place that tax the wealthy. There's estate duty, there's taxes on property, there's transfer duties, donations tax, securities transfers tax, as well as very high personal income tax levels. Our top marginal personal income tax rate competes with the countries in the OECD. And as I said before, and as shown in the budget, our personal income tax has a very large proportion of total revenues, which is higher than many countries in the OECD. We've also got capital gains tax. The recommendation from the OECD is that if you have a very comprehensive personal income tax system, you don't need a wealth tax. And we agree with those views. And we've said that in parliamentary questions before. If you've looked at the experience of other countries with wealth taxes, they've delivered very little revenue. They cost a lot to administer, and they're difficult to enforce. SARS needs additional funds for all sorts of things, for example, to reduce illicit trade, as well as making sure that all the current taxpayers pay the amount of tax that they should be paying. If you were to include something like this, they would need a lot more resources to be able to administer such a tax. Now, we don't think that the cost benefit works in that respect. Because we have a comprehensive personal income tax system, we are already getting a lot from those with very high incomes. If you go to the next slide. So we are committed to this approach of having a progressive tax framework. We have one of the most progressive personal income tax systems in the world, which is why that tax base is very narrow on the personal income tax side. There are lots of international initiatives to try and reduce the amount that very high net worth individuals can hide. So now we do get information from other jurisdictions in terms of bank accounts, in terms of what is being held offshore, and that can be used to change assessments on high net worth individuals. Some of the respondents in the hearings did talk about the high net wealth unit within SARS, which does focus on a lot of these issues. Part of the comments also to say that there are too many loopholes for the wealthy, and that's what we try to fix every year. Every year we look at potential loopholes and we try and close them down. The ones that we are looking at this year are in terms of donations to spouses as you become a non-resident. So we are changing that to disallow a case where a non-resident spouse can then a resident spouse can then transfer a large amount to a non-resident spouse, get all the money out of the country without being able to pay the taxes that are due. That is just one of the many measures that we do each year to try and reduce these loopholes. Next slide. In terms of the other tax proposals, there were quite a few that were mentioned. I'll give a couple of comments on them. On the gambling tax, there were concerns about the rate, local industries, and potentially pushing the public to illegal operators. We will be looking at this. The comment period was the 27th of February. We will still have workshops on this issue and stakeholder consultations where we will get into the details of some of the concerns and see how we can address them. The aim is to have draft legislation ready by later in this year. On additional zero rating, there were 2 requests for additional zero rating, which we've also had before. We've been consistent in the budgets that we have published to say that we don't believe additional zero rating is an effective mechanism to assist the poor. The current zero rating basket is already well targeted to the poor. So if you then zero rate additional products, you are going to be giving revenue to higher income households. So not only will that revenue not go directly to poor households because higher income households also consume those goods, but also there is no guarantee at all that the price of those products will actually decrease. When we zero rated other products a few years ago, such as sanitary pads, the price didn't decrease to the full extent of the reduction in VAT, which means that a portion of the gains were then accrued straight to the producers of that product. So it's not well targeted. You're not guaranteed to get the benefits to individuals and poorer income households. And we don't believe it's a useful mechanism. It's a very blunt tool. Rather increase expenditure directly on poorer households, and you will get a greater benefit. And that has been our approach in a number of budgets, and it remains that approach here. There were some comments about the VAT treatment of gold. We can say that we will have consultations with those who've already commented on that issue, and we can do that consultation before the release of the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill. There were some requests on refinement for the two-pot regime. We do aim to initiate discussions later this year to talk about that for potential access to the retirement pot, but only under very strict financial distress conditions. I also want to mention a couple of other issues. There were some requests for additional tax incentives for SMMEs. For example, in the first year that they set up that they don't need to pay tax, we can take those away and have a look at them. There were some other points on SMMEs that can be used as well. We'll also look at that. There was some questions on financial literacy and the funding for financial literacy. We are going to see what we can do. We completely agree that financial literacy is important and it needs to be addressed, and it has many benefits for the consumer. We are looking at a strategy that we can publish and look at potential funding for that as well in terms of the proposals. I think I've covered as many as I can. There might be a couple that I've missed, but happy to take comments on those proposals. Lastly, on the process, the Western Cape High Court did do the judgment on the VAT increase. We are studying that judgment, and then we can decide on the next steps. There were also concerns that the 2025 tax bills haven't been promulgated, even though we've already done the 2026 budget. Luckily, most of the amendments that had a 1 January effective date within those tax bills aren't effective immediately. Well, they will be effective from 1 January, but they can be dealt with in the assessments that companies and individuals do later on in the year when the tax year is finished. So it won't have a real impact today, but it will change the assessments that need to be completed later. We are working with the presidency to get those 2025 tax bills signed as soon as we can. Just on that point, we are looking to expedite the process this year. So we will try to get the draft Taxation Laws Amendment Bill out earlier in the year, which will give both the public, ourselves, and the committee more time to assess so that they can be tabled earlier than October, November, which we did last year. Hopefully there won't be 3 budgets this year and we can get it done a lot quicker. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chair. If I can continue then on questions around fiscal policy and the fiscal framework. If I can go to the next slide, I'll go through this very quickly. I won't read everything that's on here. And I think, Chair, we've made this point over and over, but this is part of the way in which the budget process operates when we engage both internally and externally in government. There are different views and about the appropriate fiscal stance. We acknowledge those different views. And what we try to do, and what this budget tries to do, is to be balanced in that regard, as I said earlier. Some comments about debt stabilization. No, debt stabilization is not an end in and of itself. The budget process does not include that as a goal for its own sake, but rather, as we make clear in the documentation, you can't have strong economic growth, stable, sustainable growth, employment creation, and a strong social safety net if you don't have fiscal sustainability. You allow debt to go out of control, that pretty much guarantees that you're not going to be able to pay social grants sometime in the future, either sooner or later. So this is what we care about. We care about the sustainability of these services, the ability of government to invest for future growth. And we also are very much aware, Chair, of history, which is that, as I've presented at this forum in the past, and we've written in Chapter 1 of the Budget Review, I think of 2022, We have had periods of time when government tried to spend its way out of problems in the South African context, and it just didn't work. We had spending levels after 2010 that on average were about 9% increases every single year in spending. We didn't get any growth by doing that. The only thing we got was more debt. So we consider that we need to be balanced in that regard. And indeed, this budget not only stabilizes debt, but it maintains the social wage. And we provide information in that regard. Next slide. And also, Chair, it's important to point out that there's no competition in our minds between ensuring fiscal sustainability and improvements in services and socioeconomic indicators. And these things are not in our internal discussions and in the crafting of the budget. They're not treated as sort of mutually exclusive. And indeed, historically, we can see that as the fiscal position improves, including the sustainability of debt, that's correlated well with an improvement in key socioeconomic indicators. During times when we have reduced our fiscal risks emanating from debt, we have seen improvements in life expectancy, school enrollment, infant mortality, and access to basic services. When debt has then gone the other way, we've then struggled. Next slide. There were various comments about fiscal consolidation and inclusive growth. There was submissions made with respect to counter-cyclical fiscal policy support for vulnerable households. There were submissions that welcomed the CPI-aligned adjustments, and there were others that had a different view in this regard. And of course, there were participants that also raised concerns with respect to the geopolitical shocks, which I have touched on before. We agree, and we have always agreed, on ensuring counter-cyclical fiscal support, especially during economic downturns. And that is why we need to ensure fiscal sustainability by building up fiscal buffers. It's quite clear and quite obvious. If you denude your buffers, you make it difficult and even impossible to actually ensure counter-cyclical support. In other words, when the economic cycle turns downward, you find yourself without the fiscal space to do anything for the most vulnerable. It's absolutely critical that we ensure that we build up the buffers, that we improve our fiscal balances, we reduce debt burden and the implications of that, and we put ourselves in a better position because as events recently are showing, a downturn will come, probably not from us, it'll come from somewhere else in the world. And it won't be our fault, but it will be our fault if we're not prepared for it. There was some questions around providing relief for the vulnerable. Chris has already touched on that, so I'm not going to get into it. And of course, there were issues related to how we manage risks within the budget system. And of course, we do that, including in the MTBPS, with the fiscal risk statement and our transparent reporting in respect of the budget. Next slide. There were questions around the work that we have been undertaking around anchoring fiscal policy and the fiscal anchor and the design. Chair, I think what's very, very important for me to mention here is we are going out on a consultation phase on this. We have actually been consulting on it since we published a discussion document last year. We are gathering views. We are listening to views. We are taking things, and again, I keep repeating that word, trying to find a good balance between the very wide variety of views that we have received. But we are consulting, Chairperson. We have not made a final decision by any means. We are consulting. But the idea essentially is that there should be a statutory requirement on government to ensure fiscal sustainability and on every administration to ensure that the fiscal policy that administration, most notably after every 5 years when there's an election and the new administration comes in, that their fiscal policy is sustainable, and that in fact it doesn't put the next administration in a position where you have to have either painful consolidation measures implemented, or you find yourself in an IMF program. We want to avoid those things by ensuring sustainability over the long term. And so the idea is that there should be a legal requirement for every government to table a medium-term fiscal plan, and in that fiscal plan, they must include the appropriate metric to measure how they will ensure that debt is sustainable throughout the term of that government. What that metric will be, we want to be flexible around that. We, at this stage, have come to a place where we don't think it should be enshrined in law, the metric, but the obligation to identify it by an administration should be enshrined in law. So that's what we mean by a principles-based approach, and we think that this is a fair balance between those who are calling for a legally mandated numerical target and those who are concerned about the implications for democratic processes in policy making, which we respect. Next slide. Yeah, we welcome the calls by participants emphasizing improvements in transparency, accountability, and the public trust. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, we have a unit in the Treasury that actually is dedicated to this. We have a unit and a Directorate of Budget Reform that spends virtually all of its time looking at improving the public participation process, improving our ranking in the Open Budget Index, and finding different ways of allowing people to participate in the process. Last year, we invited numerous stakeholders to attend a meeting with the Minister of Finance himself to express their views, and to also to hear from us explain some of the things around what is behind some of the decisions that ultimately come into the budget, and we will continue doing that. Next slide. I think I should be done. Yeah, thanks. I'm going to hand over to Mashudu, who's going to take us through expenditure. Thanks.
Thanks, Edgar, and good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members. I'm going to take you through a few slides on the comments raised on the expenditure side of the budget. Most of this, so this slide really just summarizes most of the comments on the spending side. We have sort of consolidated them. Some comments raised issues around the need to spend more on frontline services such as health, education, and police, and SARS. And here we're just indicating that in the first bullet that actually in this budget, we are indeed still spending more on education, health, and social development. And the spending on health, social development, and community development and economic development are growing faster than the spending on debt service costs. So that's the point that we're trying to make. And of course, there was many comments around the declining budgets over the 2026 NTF. And we are explaining this in this way that, in fact, there were no budget cuts in this budget, but some of those declines that could be noted in various sectors could be mainly because of base effect. Honorable members, when the minister tabled this budget, he also tabled the special appropriation bill, which makes significant allocations in 2025-26 in year of about 22 billion rand. And because of that base effect of increased allocations in 2025-26, then you may see in certain sectors a bit of a decline in budget in 2026-27 and some years of the NTF period. And these allocations went mainly in the current year to infrastructure projects. And of course, there was comments around the slight decline of the budget of the Defence Force. And we are indicating again, this is mainly due to the base effect because there were once-off allocations to defense to deal with the DRC and Mozambique deployments. But as you know, those deployments have come to an end, and hence you will see a slight dip in the budget allocation. The last aspect of comments that were raised by various stakeholders was how are we as Treasury going to make sure that funds are used for their intended purposes. And we wish to indicate here that we do have various oversight mechanisms to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of spending. To ensure that funds are used for intended purposes, we do earmark some allocations in the Appropriation Act, and the Minister of Finance is also empowered to impose some conditions in those allocations to ensure that the funds are used for intended purposes. The next few slides, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, I'm going to go through them quite quickly because they're just providing more details in terms of what I've just outlined. And I wish to also reiterate the fact that most of the comments that were raised, they are detailed write-up or responses in the estimates of national expenditure, which is the explanatory memorandum to the appropriation bill. So for each vote, there are detailed outline of the rationale of expenditure movements in each department. So this slide really just wants to show or reiterate the point that spending on education, health, and social protection constitutes 70.3% of the social wage that Edgar outlined earlier. And the fact that expenditures in these sectors grow up by above 4% over the medium-term period. And the health sector and education, especially in provinces, will receive around 9.9 billion rand and 21 billion rand to deal with the compensation of employee issues and employment of doctors. And of course, we continue to allocate 50.4 billion rand over the MTF to infrastructure. Next slide, please. Yeah, there were several comments raised around the issue of presidential employment stimulus. I think one of the commentators said the allocation was halved, and we wish to indicate that that's not necessarily correct. We do make from the Fiscal an allocation of 4 billion rand towards presidential employment stimulus in 2026-27. And the remaining 6 billion rand is going to be provided through the labor activation program of the UIF. And these presidential employment programs are allocated funds through various sectors and departments. And of course, there were several comments around social protection and spending on social grants. And here we just indicate again that the spending on social grants are still quite significant over the MTF, and the all grants are increasing by inflation or CPI over the next 3 years. And of course, there were some comments around the SRD. Yes, the SRD continues in 2026-27, and there is 36.4 billion rand allocated for this extension until March 2027. And as the minister has indicated during the tabling of the budget, we are currently engaging with the Department of Social Development and Presidency in terms of how the SRD can be repurposed into a livelihood support grant that tries to link our recipients to jobs and other employment programs. Next slide, please. Several commentators also raised issues around the implementation of the NHI. And here we just want to indicate that nothing has changed from our perspective. There are allocations of around 4.4 billion rand in the system over the next 3 years to support the NHI preparedness. And as the national and engagements with the National Department of Health continues in terms of how best the NHI could be implemented. Next slide, please. Of course, I think my colleague Chris has already touched on this, and Edgar as well, that there were comments around the issue of increasing capacity to fight crime and dealing with illicit economy. And here we are indicating that in the past budgets, 12.1 billion rand was allocated to police to increase the headcount of SARS members. And of course, in this budget, around 2 billion rand is provided to police and defense from the criminal assets recovery account to deal with organized crime and strengthen border security, amongst other priorities. And of course, SARS was allocated 7.5 billion rand in the 2025 budget to deal with capacity issues and technology enhancement. Next slide, please. So this slide deals with comments that were raised by various stakeholders, especially around support to small business, industrialization and export. And here we wish to indicate that over the medium term, 1.3 billion rand is allocated to support SMMEs in rural, township and peri-urban areas. And of course, a further 24.5 million is provided for business infrastructure support to assist about 150 SMEs. And the DTIC, Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, does provide around 18.9 billion rand over the MTF for business incentive programs to support industrialization. And of course, I've already touched on the issue of around 11 billion rand provided to the Presidential Employment Initiative, which also finds its way in this sector. And of course, there were comments around support to cushion fragile economic sectors and the issue of foot and mouth disease. We wish to indicate here that currently in this financial year, we are working ourselves together with the Department of Agriculture to shift some fundings towards a response to the issue of foot and mouth disease. And those engagements are quite far, and there will be some funding shifted towards that to address that issue. Next slide. I think this is the last slide from my side. Over to you, Edgar.
Yeah, Vessel.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and members. I will take you through the next 3 slides, which will cover the debt management strategy. We received a couple of comments on how government implements a debt management strategy, and the next 3 slides will cover some of those issues raised. Transparency of our debt management policy or strategy is very important. Hence, government publishes a detailed debt management strategy during every national budget and medium-term budget policy statements, which includes tables on the financing strategy, also portfolio risk benchmarks and information on government's debt portfolio. This is further supported by rich information that we publish on our Treasury websites on a monthly basis. Government's debt management strategy balance costs, risk and liquidity. Government's borrowing decisions are guided by 3 objectives, which are the liquidity management, ensuring that there's sufficient cash available to meet government's debt obligations at all time, and actually obligations at all time. Refinancing risk, minimizing the risk of large debt redemptions within short time frames. then also the cost of borrowing to achieve the lowest possible financing cost over the long term within acceptable risk parameters. To meet these objectives, government actively managed the composition of the debt portfolio through a mix of instruments, currencies, and maturities. We maintain a diversified funding mix where 90% of our debt is in domestic debt, 10% in foreign currency debt, thereby keeping within our risk exposure of 15% to foreign currency debt. External financing sources include multilateral development banks, international financial institutions, and capital markets, which can offer favorable terms and support foreign reserve accumulation. Maintaining the optimization of a maturity profile, a mix of short and long-term borrowing is employed to balance costs and refinancing risk. Bond switch programs are used to exchange short-dated instruments for longer-term instruments, helping smooth the redemption profile and reducing rollover risk. The destination bonds used in the switch auctions are the same bonds that we use through the nominal bond auction program. Our switch program is conducted on a cash neutral basis. Therefore, there should not be a difference in cost between the two policies or strategies. Strategic use of the gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account transfer from JFECRA will be used to reduce government's gross borrowing requirement. Therefore, the growth in the stock of debt and debt service cost. 100 billion was transferred to government in 24-25, with 25 billion in 25-26 and another 56 billion penciled in for 27-28. It's important to note that the SARP cannot sell its reserves to provide disbursement of funds to the Treasury. All instruments and funding choices involve trade-offs. A prudent strategy requires a deep understanding of the risk and costs associated with each instrument to ensure debt remains sustainable, affordable, and reliant in the face of economic shocks. Next slide, please. The next slide, in a sense, I already covered. So the core principles of the JFECRA Act and the JFECRA Settlement Agreement are designed to protect the credibility, independence, and stability of the SARP and the economy. The settlement arrangements does not allow for SARP to use currency reserves in this regard. In the 25 medium-term budget policy statement, government announced that the JFECRA buffer for 25 has been increased to 260 billion from 250 billion previously. At the end of March 25, the JFECRA balance amounted to 364 billion. Deducting the 50 billion commitments of the previous arrangement leaves another 54 billion to be distributed between National Treasury and the Reserve Bank, which has been done or will be done in a ratio of 31 billion to NT and 23 billion to the Reserve Bank in 26-27. Next slide, please. there was a lot of comments around government debt and the debt stabilizing in 25-26. And Mr. Shishi covered the bulk of those comments in his presentation. To stabilize government debt, government policy focus on achieving a primary budget surplus. In addition, government for the last couple of years indicated that debt will stabilize in 25-26. Although we never targeted a specific level because of the sensitivity of these forecasts to changes in economic growth forecast. Our debt stabilization has been achieved now in 25-26 at a 78.9% level, and the debt trajectory will then also decline over the next 8 to 10 years as indicated in the figure. The debt in the current year stabilize at a higher level than forecasted in the MTPPs, mainly due to adjustment to nominal GDP growth and also government taking advantage of demand in the domestic and foreign market to increase financing, therefore reducing borrowing needs in the next 2 years. Thanks, Chair. That brings it into my presentation.
Okay, Wendy.
Thank you so much. I'll present on the division of revenue that deals with the provinces and local government, the equitable share and conditional grants. Next slide, please. Okay, the first issue deals with additional allocations outside the provincial equitable share formula, and some concerns were raised about it. Just to indicate that a very small component of the allocations are allocated outside the formula. It's generally small allocations, and some of them are temporary. For example, where conditional grants are phased into the provincial equitable share, where the conditional grant allocations were different to what the equitable share formula distribution will be. So it's phased in generally over a 3-year period. It's also for once-off allocations, such as the early retirement program and the voluntary exit program additions that were also allocated through the provincial equitable share formula. We're very transparent about the allocations that's done outside the formula. It's indicated in Annexure W1 to the Division of Revenue Bill. But having said that, the concern is noted by National Treasury. We agree that we should keep these type of allocations to a minimum. So part of the review of the provincial equitable share formula, what we will be doing is we'll do analysis and determine whether there's those that can be abolished, particularly those that's been in existence for a number of years. We will be doing it in consultation with stakeholders that include the FFC. It includes provincial treasuries, for example. Then a lot of inputs were provided about the share that local government gets, often referred to as the 9% that goes to local government, and it's often mooted that a bigger share be allocated to local government. And just to indicate, all spheres of government are responsible for critical service delivery. For example, National is responsible for services such as social grants, also defense and police. Provinces also provide very critical services such as health and basic education. And those spheres of government have no ability or very little ability to raise revenues themselves, where local government can. So all the spheres of government have priorities and expenditure pressures. Those need to be weighed up because the resources to be allocated are not finite. And it needs to be ensured that those processes are balanced to ensure that all the needs are addressed. Having said that, again, we are busy with a review of the local government fiscal framework, and those results will also feed into the national budget process. The intention is to have this review done by the end of this year so that it can feed into the hopefully the 27 MTF budget cycle. Next slide, please. There's also a very important issue raised, and it's a very critical work that's currently being undertaken by the Department of Cooperative Governance, and it's also received a lot of airtime, the local government white paper, and National Treasury is currently busy with the local government fiscal framework. And maybe to indicate how the two processes intertwine and interlink, the local government white paper would put the guardrails or the policy intentions, and the local government fiscal framework will deal with the details within those parameters. A lot of work has already been done with regard to the local government fiscal framework. Municipalities have been interviewed. The methodology, that is how the review will be undertaken, what issues will be looked at, that is currently underway as well. Data gathering is currently underway, and what we're trying to do is, one of the biggest challenges experienced so far is the lack of data, and we're going to do a lot of effort to look at alternative sources to also inform the study. And we've also got a lot of data in National Treasury, all the local government budget data that will also be analysed. So that's how the two processes interlink, and they're both complementary. Then we all know that there's a very critical reform currently underway. Previous slide, please. In terms of the Metro Trading Services reforms, where attention is given to provide water, sanitation and electricity and solid waste in a much more structured and affordable ways, in a much more efficient way. And the whole system is designed on incentives and performance criteria taken into account when allocations are determined to the metropolitan municipalities. It has already started, and as the system progresses, the criteria and the performance standards will be set much higher to receive the incentive allocations. Thanks. Next slide. Then a lot of issues were raised with regard to dysfunctional municipalities. And maybe what is very important to indicate, it is not one strategy that needs to be implemented, it's multiple strategies that need to link into each other and complement each other. And for example, you start with support, and if support does not work, then you need to go to more drastic steps. And ultimately, if a municipality is in collapse, then it's very important that a municipal recovery program be put in place. So those are all complementary. National Treasury is looking at strengthening its municipal financial recovery services, and to ensure that the municipal recovery programs have got a bigger impact and success. We're also working together with DCOC as a whole of government approach to strengthen municipal support and intervention. National Treasury is also working with provincial treasuries so that they can improve their support to municipalities in terms of budget implementation and preparation. And then another important reform that National Treasury is busy with, we all know that municipalities have got the ability to raise their own revenues, but even larger municipalities sometimes struggle to enhance and optimize their own revenues. So we have developed a revenue assessment tool that assists municipalities to improve their ability to collect own revenues. I've already referred to the capacity building work that we're doing. And then there's also, just the previous slide again, please. What is important here as well is a very critical reform that also received a lot of attention, is we do need to acknowledge that there's smaller and municipalities that just do not have the capacity to implement infrastructure programs by themselves. Often that is also linked to municipalities that are struggling with other issues like governance and financial sustainability issues. So what is needed is, instead of taking the money away because they can't spend it or spend it appropriately, to look at how can we benefit those communities in those municipalities despite the capacity constraints that's faced by those municipalities. And the Division of Revenue Bill of this year has been amended to provide that external stakeholders such as MISA, the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and capable district municipalities can support local municipalities that do not have capacity, and it extends the current provisions where Eskom and water boards can already do so. Next slide, please. And then the PPPs also received a lot of attention, and we agree it's not the only solution, but it's definitely a very good solution where PPPs can definitely assist municipalities with weaker capacity to implement projects successfully. And there are a number of PPPs, not many, unfortunately. We would have liked to see more in the water space, where, for example, water is provided to communities in a much more cost-effective way than what the municipality would have been able to do. And then the bottom slide just indicates all the legal frameworks that's in place in case municipalities need to be put under direct fiscal control because they're struggling to implement their budgets in a credible way. Thanks, that is it from my side.
Thanks, Chair. This is the last set of slides and then we're done. I'm going to touch on infrastructure investment on my side. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Keta. Yeah, so there were various points made about infrastructure, but some of the information I think is already in the budget. So, you know, I'm loath to repeat it, but I think it's important to point out that we agree that infrastructure spending could be higher, but it's headed that way. And we're growing it faster than anything else in the budget at the current moment. Of course, we, and I think all stakeholders and honorable members, will be aware of the fact that you do need to balance between fiscal injections and the capacity to execute. And so you need to do this in a steady fashion. There's no point in simply saying, well, there isn't enough money for infrastructure, putting it all in there, and then there's no capacity to deliver. So we are doing this in a measured and focused way. In addition to that, we also recognize that we need a holistic approach that takes the entirety of the state on board. And so state-owned companies are the largest contributor to the capital investment. And we think that's a good thing. Because first of all, it means that the internal capacity, as well as the historical experience of many of our big state-owned companies, can become activated in these areas. And secondly, it does help with the strength of their own balance sheet for them to develop these assets. And all of that comes to 1.06 trillion, of which those state-owned enterprises account for 445 billion. These sectors, the sectors of energy, transport, logistics, and water, are absolutely essential for the economy, and the budget recognizes that, and that is why 76.6% of public infrastructure spending is in those sectors to improve energy, transport, logistics, and our water supply. With respect to social infrastructure, we are spending on social infrastructure. We are increasing spending on social infrastructure. 160 billion is being spent in that regard. We are improving access to basic services with these spending allocations, including the allocations that we've introduced for the expansion of early childhood development. And that's why the education sector, among other things, receives quite a lot of money. And the money includes also injections for school facilities as well as higher education facilities. And as I've indicated, if you put it all together, the payments for capital assets is the fastest growing economic classification in this budget, by far actually. 9.7% is the growth rate. But we also recognize that we need to mobilize more instruments to finance government's infrastructure program. And that's why we are taking steps to expand the asset class that we use, and to bring in a larger pool of investors in this regard. We had a successful infrastructure bond issuance in December, and just that bond issuance raised 11.8 billion rands. And we will continue in this direction to expand the capital injections. Next slide, which I think is the very last slide of the presentations. There were comments both in this meeting and in other ones related to the private sector and the public sector. Chair, our position is that private sector participation is a good thing, and that we need to take a pragmatic approach to it. We have, as government, a portfolio of institutions, in other words, state-owned companies, that can both engage with the private sector, but also can prepare credible projects. And that's why we're leveraging DFIs like the DBSA and the IDCs to do exactly that. They have the experience and the ability, and they'll continue to do it. Program offices are being set up, particularly for water and transport, to help in this regard. And then finally, Chair, on public-private partnerships, we have spoken at length in previous meetings about the reforms to the PPP framework of government. We've made progress in this regard for national government and for provinces, and we're currently in the process of reforming the PPP framework for municipalities, for local government. The PPP pipeline is growing. There's 63 PPP projects at different stages of development. We have got a number of large-scale and strategic PPPs that are in line to be concluded this year. And of course, within that framework, we emphasize SMMEs and the triple BEE framework. And of course, as we've said before, we now have a framework that allows for unsolicited bids to be part of the overall framework. All of this information is in the budget review, and I would invite honorable members and stakeholders to familiarize themselves with the Annexure D of the budget review, which lists all the projects and provides all the financial information in that regard. Chair, I think we'll end it there, and I want to thank you for the time that you've given us for this presentation. As I said, there are annexures that people can go through at their convenience. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, National Treasury and SARS. Can you hear me, honorable members?
Can hear you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. That was so informative presentation and clarification on the questions from the stakeholders. Honorable members, I think now we are going to allow the stakeholders to comment on the presentation, just to give them 2 minutes each, especially those who have done the presentation in our last public participation. And can I start with DG Moray Trust? Do you have that?
Thank you very much,
Chair. I see there is a hand from Honorable Beck.
Yeah, let me check. Dr. Beck.
Chairperson, I would like to move swiftly on, but it would be amiss not to raise the point by one of our regular contributors in that they had to leave today, but we're now an hour and a half into the meeting, where it seems that Treasury and SARS takes a bit more time. And the suggestion from this participant was that maybe we just acknowledge that going forward, because we do seem to keep our public participation to a 2-minute strict window, whereas SARS and Treasury is not kept to the same standard. And his suggestion is maybe we just acknowledge that and give a bit more time to the public participants, instead of, maybe also subjecting SARS and Treasury to the same strict limits.
We did the same, Beck. I think what is important, there was no way that we can stop SARS and National Treasury, because they had to clarify the stakeholders. We'll hear from the stakeholders, then we'll take it from there. Let's give them a chance, and other than maybe debating about what they will want to say, sometimes they might not even have more issues to raise. With due respect, honourable member, can I now allow the stakeholders to comment, please? Moray?
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd like to say good morning to you, as well as to the honourable members present this morning, and to National Treasury and SARS as well. From the DG Murray Trust, or DGMT, we'd like to acknowledge that we appreciate the National Treasury's balanced approach that they've described as it relates to alcohol taxation, needing to both reduce harm and consider the broader market dynamics, and those include the illicit trade. We would like to also echo that we do support SARS's 5-point plan to reduce illicit trade, and want today to emphasize that while we know that the discussion paper is still under consultation, and want to today emphasize that alcohol harm, however, is still very severe, and want to ensure that we are not delaying reform in alcohol policy and alcohol pricing policy more specifically, in order to deal with the illicit trade, and that both of those can happen at the same time. But thank you very much for the detailed presentations and responses today, and we look forward to further consultations. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Before I take another stakeholder, let me acknowledge I just been reminded now that on a visual platform again, we are joined by Commissioner Kisveter. I'm not sure if he's left. Yes, he's still on the platform. My apology for not recognizing them earlier. And our DM Masondo also is on the visual platform. You are welcome, honorable members and the Commissioner, to the visual platform. Can I now go to the next stakeholder, which is apologies, sorry, honorable members. The South African SAPA.
Thank you very much,
South
Chair.
African Alcohol Policy Alignment.
It's Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance, Chair. And thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. And we also truly appreciate the opportunity as SAPA to engage in these public discussions. And what we are wanting to say regarding the presentation from SARS, as well as the National Treasury, is that we welcome the decision to allocate the additional resources to strengthen efforts to combat illicit trade. And we also want to say that we appreciate and we support the 5-point plan that SARS has just is going to be implementing. But we do want to emphasize that fiscal policy remains one of the most effective and evidence-based tools available to reduce alcohol-related harm. Increasing excise taxes above inflation alongside the introduction of MUP, which is minimum unit pricing, are internationally recognized measures that reduce harmful consumption while supporting public health objectives. But we also want to just highlight a concern that is consistently raised by communities across the country, which is that while illicit trade is often cited as a reason to oppose stronger alcohol pricing policies, communities are witnessing large volumes of legally produced alcohol being transported into townships and rural areas every day. Trucks that are carrying illicit alcohol continue to supply large quantities of cheap alcohol into vulnerable communities, which is significantly increasing availability and contributing to harmful consumption patterns. And we are saying this is really a major driver of alcohol-related harm at community level, and it can no longer be ignored in the policy discussions. Communities that are engaged with by SAPA consistently say that they are deeply concerned that the illicit trade is sometimes used as a justification to resist stronger fiscal policies, when the far greater challenge they experience as communities daily is the oversupply and aggressive distribution of illicit alcohol. And these approaches, in terms of dealing with this challenge of alcohol harm using MUP as well as increasing excise tax above inflation, are approaches that are fully aligned with the country's National Drug Master Plan, which is aimed at reducing availability and affordability of harmful substances. But we do say that we do acknowledge that there's illicit trade, but illicit trade should not be used as the cover for the fact that we are not implementing effective policies like excise tax increases above inflation as well as an MUP. We will be engaging with National Treasury in the process around the alcohol review, and we appreciate that that's a process that as the public we are going to be a part of. And thank you very much, Chair, again for the opportunity for SAPA to engage in this process.
Thank you very much, SAPA. And Sovereign Africa rating, that is SAR.
Thank you, Chair. Ted Maselesele here from SAR. We appreciate the comments that were made in the relevant presentation, specifically around debt collection, and commodity prices. These will be assessed against our methodology and assumptions and incorporated into the upcoming South African credit rating updates that we aim to publish in the coming weeks. Other than that, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That is short and sweet. Families for children. Thank you. Do we have families for children on the platform? We don't have.
I don't see them in the platform.
We don't see them. Thank you very much, Dr. Mangweni. Dr. Mela? Is Dr. Mela on the visual platform?
He's the one who left, Chair, left his presentation in the comment.
All right, thank you very much. Breadline Africa?
Breadline Africa sent an apology, Chair. They did not attend today.
Oh, that is highlighted. Thank you very much. FITA, Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association? Is FITA on the visual platform? No. Thank you.
No, Chair, I don't see them as well.
Women on Farms Project.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Kara Makai. I represent Women on Farms Project today. I'd like to say thank you again for this participation, and thank you very much for Treasury and for SARS for the feedback. Regarding the wealth tax, what I saw is that the stance remains unchanged from both Treasury side and SARS side, which is basically they're saying that they don't feel they need a wealth tax at the moment, and it's better to enforce compliance. So I would like us to go back to the VIT study that shows that even a moderate tax between 3 to 7% on the richest 1% with the tax evasion rate could bring in 134 billion rand. And that is 20 times more transfer duties and 60 times more than estate duties for 2007. So Mr. Sisi says we should take a holistic perspective. I want to agree with him on that. Can we look at our tax system more holistically, and can we start to introduce different notions and not see a wealth tax as a competition, but instead a complement? And then Mr. Axel mentioned that according to their cost-benefit analysis, it comes out that it's easier to comply than for a wealth tax. Could we please see this information as civil society? And actually, I'm calling for SARS and National Treasury to please set up a meeting with the stakeholders here that want a wealth tax so we can discuss it. Because we've also done cost-benefit analysis, but ours come out to a completely different answer. And the last thing I want to say is that I accept that a wealth tax we accept that it's complicated, but is it possible for SARS to change the answer from, no, we won't implement a wealth tax for now, but given the pressure and given civil society's needs and given the inequality of the society, we will begin to explore what is possible. We will begin to research the possibility of what a wealth tax would look like in South Africa, and we will involve all stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Women on Farms Project, a special request to the National Treasury to arrange a meeting with the stakeholder. PEP, Public Economy Project.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson, Deputy Minister, Commissioner, and Honourable Members. Thank you for the opportunity to present and for the thoroughgoing public presentations and discussions we've had. It speaks to the fact that we've got a very robust and mature democracy that this country has built over the past 32 years, and something we have to defend against elite capture. Chair, the Money Bills Act allows us a fair amount of time to deliberate, and I appreciate committees have very tight constraints, but it is possible for us to lengthen these deliberations, as others have known, for more engaged and robust discussions. I've been involved for quite a few years, and I can say that the quality of the submissions has improved, and there's a much more thoroughgoing discussion we're having with Treasury, and that speaks well to our future as a constitutional democracy. Chair, our presentation centered around the shift in the fiscal objective from leveling debt through consolidation and now moving towards debt reduction. We still stand by the point we made that the fiscal effort required over the next 8 years, and let's look at the MTF over the next 3 years, of 180 billion rands seems quite ambitious, and the burden may fall on expenditure if growth continues to underperform. And so we still urge a more moderate path of debt reduction. Thank you, Chairperson, and we look forward to further engagements.
Thank you. That is short and sweet. BASA, Beer Association of South Africa. BASA? We don't have South African.
He just joined now, Mr. Chauke.
Mr. Chauke, are you ready to respond? Were you able to listen to the presentation? Or should we just jump you, then we'll come after SAITA, South African Institute of Taxation? Mr. Chauke? Let's go to SAITA and the Temangwe, and then we'll give him the opportunity after, just to save time. Can we go to SAITA, South Africa Institute of Taxation?
Good morning, Honourable Chair. I hope I'm audible. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present, and we'd like to obviously greet the Honourable Minister of Finance, the Deputy Ministers of Finance, the Commissioner of SARS, and the Deputy Commissioner of SARS. From the South African Institute of Taxation perspective, we reiterate our comments that we appreciate the robust deliberations that we've had in the detailed presentation. We also particularly appreciate that it was circulated ahead of time this time, so we were able to engage the information appropriately. We welcome the efforts that are being made by SARS, and also would like to thank National Treasury for seeing the need for capacitating SARS more, because as the South African Institute of Taxation, we made specific comments around the fact that the tax to GDP ratio is quite high, and we appreciate what the DDG has mentioned, that it might even go higher, but you've also realized that this should not only be taxing the narrow base, but moving to bring everybody broader, just to get more taxpayers to contribute to paying their fair share of taxes, as well as to growing the economy. So we appreciate those comments. And lastly, we also appreciate the comments from the Deputy Commissioner as mentioning the balancing approach, or the balanced approach that SARS is taking with regards to the debt collection as the state, and we work at the intersection of tax practitioners and the public. We appreciate that it's not just the hard stance that has been taken here, but there is the balanced approach where write-offs and foregoing debt collection is something that's been looked at. And lastly, we do look forward to engaging on the gambling tax, and we will, of course, look forward to more stakeholder engagements. And thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sani of South African Institute of Taxation. Can I go back to BASA? Mr. Kutumena? BASA? Dr. Mango?
Hi, Chair. I reckon Mr. Chauke has connection problem because he's here in the platform, but nothing from him.
Can I go to Comment Park, Kosatu, Comment Parks?
Okay. Morning, Chair, morning, members, morning, Minister and colleagues. So a couple of quick things. I think one, Chair, the fundamental frustration on our part as COSATU is that we're normalizing 1% growth. We're normalizing about 40% unemployment. And we really need to have the budget speaking to those two fundamental crises. Otherwise, whatever we do is literally just moving chairs on a Titanic. We had hoped, Chair, we do appreciate there's a progressive allocation to infrastructure. We can't belittle that. But we need to have a stimulus package for SMEs, for industrial, for export sectors, and also to cushion the economy from the coming shocks from the Middle East war. We think we should be giving more support to Eskom to reduce the price of electricity, which is really suffocating industrial sectors, and again, to give more support to Transnet to help unlocking export industries. Chair, the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program has been cut, and we can't understand why when we have 12 million people unemployed, we don't ramp those up. Not everything can come from the fiscus, we agree. Some must come from the DFI, some from the private sector. But the fact is, it has been cut in this program. There's a disjuncture, Chair, between what the SONA commits, like around labor inspectors, and the budget then becomes silent on that. Similarly, Chair, we speak on the SONA about law enforcement, but we're not giving the support we really need to give to SAPS, to the Defence Force, to the judiciary, to win the war against crime and corruption. Chair, members of Parliament have received an inflation adjustment in their salaries. SOD grant recipients in 5 out of the 6 years it has existed have never once received a simple inflation adjustment, and that's a fundamental moral failure on government's part. Chair, there is some reinforcement of the Defence Force. We appreciate that. But when you have members of the Defence Force, Chair, now receiving 1 meal a day, not even 3, just 1 a day, again, it's a crisis of mismanagement, and there's a need for intervention. I think lastly, Chair, we really hoped to see more support given to SARS to improve tax compliance.
Honourable members?
Okay, I'm done, Chair. Thanks.
Aye, Chair.
There seems to be a challenge from the side of the chairperson. Honorable Ndlovu, are you there? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. I don't know what was happening. It seems there is something around. Yeah, I'm here, Doctor. Thanks very much.
Okay. Please proceed.
It's I think we are done with COSATU. Heineken beverage.
Good day, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, good morning. I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Minister and Deputy Ministers, Commissioner Kisweta and Deputy Commissioner Makubu, members of the National Treasury team, and last but not least, the various SARS officials. Thank you for your time and feedback today. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the response, Honourable Chair. On behalf of Heineken Beverages, I welcome the comments from all stakeholders, and in particular, Mr. Axelson's recognition of the link between any measures that result in increased pricing, such as excise, and the growth of illicit trade, and the commitment by government now to holistically tackle this head-on. At this juncture, I do, however, wish to emphasise that in line with the UN political declaration and Treasury's own policy statement, the focus of interventions remain the reduction of harmful alcohol consumption and not overall alcohol consumption, as stated by Mr. Axelson. This is a very important distinction to make and not merely a correction of a technicality. Addressing harmful use requires very different measures and interventions that target the root causes of such behaviour and requires a very balanced approach. This speaks to the UN's declaration's call for a whole-of-society approach and the consideration of each country's national context in considering policy options. As acknowledged, illicit alcohol remains wholly harmful and must be addressed specifically, as it undermines both public health and government revenue. Heineken Beverages looks forward to receiving information from the National Treasury team around the public consultation process, and we emphasise the need for adequate notice, please, and details to be provided to allow all stakeholders to participate constructively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Winsome Africa.
Thank you so much, Chairperson and honorable members and fellow stakeholders.
We just want to take this opportunity as Winsome Africa and thank the National Treasury and SARS for answering some of our concerns and questions. We must note that most of our concerns and questions remains largely unanswered. And we do acknowledge that there is a time constraint. But however, some written responses will be sufficient to at least to all of our concerns, because we are just not commentators. We are here representing various stakeholders, so we do need answers and timelines to how some of our concerns will be resolved, especially for us coming from the business side, from the SMEs. The proposal around the 15-day payment that should be implemented for all the departments, the issues around the relief on the SARS for the first year of SMEs in their operations. These are urgent concerns. As entrepreneurs, we are not asking for bread. We know how to bake the bread. We know where the oven is, but we are asking for an environment that will enable entrepreneurs to flourish, as we know that they are the silver bullet in solving the unemployment problem and growing the economy. Thank you for the opportunity to engage, and we look forward for possibly more engagement with the Treasury and National Treasury and SARS more closely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musana. And then please, can you submit those unanswered questions that you need clarity on, please, so that you can receive written responses. Amanda Mobi. Amanda Mobi. Amanda Mobi.
I don't see them in the platform, Chair.
Okay. SAB.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the honourable members, as well as to the National Treasury team. We appreciate the commentary provided by the technical team regarding our written and oral submission made to this platform. I'd like to particularly answer the question around the excise tax increase. While we do acknowledge the national interest to maintain fiscal sustainability, in which using tax revenue instruments to maintain that is necessary, including the excise tax instrument in the short term, there still needs to be a long-term admission to the fact that economic growth remains a priority and economic sustainability of the industries that contribute to the fiscus remain fundamental. So the balance between taxing industries and indeed many points have been made around not being able to tax any industry or any taxpayer into growth remains a necessity. And having experienced more of the rule, at least over the last 10 to 12 years, above inflation excise increases, the data does show that there has been diminishing marginal returns to the fiscus as a result of this. So not only are they not reaping the rewards of a higher revenue in this regard, it's slowing down. So there needs to be a real conversation around how much can you tax to the point where it does not benefit the fiscus, neither the industries thereof. In terms of the excise policy, Chair, I just wanted to note that in particular, we do welcome the fact that there has been acknowledgement of the 1st of April being the introduced effective date for excise tax being implemented, but it took 8 years since the SARS team itself presented the public policy paper, noting that it would create administrative efficiencies to move the effective date of the excise increase to the 1st of April. We're saying whilst the regime is undergoing changes, it remains important to think about keeping the excise tax in line with inflation into the medium term. And that is to maintain and at least reduce the price differential between illicit and legal alcohol. I mean, there has been an emphasis on illegal alcohol prices, but no conversation or admission around how are illicit alcohol prices moving. And I think that interaction remains technically and substantively important when thinking around excise tax increases, even in the draft rates bill discussion, outside of the tax policy discussions that are under review. So I think that's important to know, Chair, and we bring that to the table after having received comment from National Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Institute for Economic Justice.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here.
Okay.
And thank you to Treasury and SARS for their responses to our submissions. So I have three questions. The first is, does the National Treasury believe it is realistic to achieve the investment target of 30% of GDP by 2030, which are set out in the medium-term development policy and the NDP? And if so, given their allocations of about 1.066 trillion over the next 3 years, and with the private sector investing at a level of about 1 trillion per year, where does the National Treasury expect, in terms of which industries does it expect the additional plus minus 800 billion per year from the private sector to come from? Which industries in the private sector will this additional investment rate implied by the NDP and the MTDP come from? The second, I would like to challenge the assertion that the debt management strategy has been successful, because the debt ratio is now expected to peak at a higher level than before, than just 4 months ago. And this obviously has implications with how expenditure will go and the primary surplus that the National Treasury is expected to run. Lastly, Chair, I would like to ask, what measures is National Treasury putting in place to try and accelerate the development of a basic income policy, given the huge fiscal implications it has? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. SA1.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to you and also the ministers being part this morning, members of Parliament and also of SARS and National Treasury. I think it's important for us to say it's not only a team talk between the industry and all the stakeholders here this morning, but it's also important to listen. And I mentioned that, to listen also to the presentations from everyone, to understand the concerns about misuse, abuse, or harmful consumption, as Heineken already mentioned, and how to take it forward. I think we can learn from international best practices. We can learn from the World Health Organization, but it's then also important, and I specifically listened to Kusatu in terms of our country and our uniquenesses and how to deal with that. And I think it's important then to understand first world practices or best buys versus what we're trying to do as South Africa. For me, the team talk will end after today, and then all of us, we're on the field. We would like to acknowledge the 3 bullets and the feedback from Chris. And Chris, thank you very much for excise, illicit trade, and specifically also in infrastructure. We're in it together, and we would like to move forward as a team. Maybe here and there we will still arm wrestle. We will make sure that we influence and that we facilitate also workshops moving forward in the best interest of the country and all the stakeholders. And whatever we do, to do it in a responsible way when we trade and also when we talk about responsible consumption. Thanks for the opportunity and wishing best of luck to all the stakeholders this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ENS, yeah, can I go to ENS?
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and good morning, honourable members. I mean, thank you again for the opportunity to talk to this, and for National Treasury and SARS for their responses. I mean, we understand that the budget is very much a balancing act of different priorities that need to be accommodated, and that it's sometimes a complex task to take everything into account. In respect of the particular points, I mean, thank you for that there will be an opportunity to engage with you on the proposed amendment on gold in the Section 11(1)(f) of the VAT Act, and we look forward to that engagement with you before you finalise the wording of the section. The second aspect that I wanted to deal with very quickly is just around the extension of the zero-rated food basket. I mean, specifically, speaking on behalf of the South African Poultry Association and Clover SA, it is disappointing that we're still getting the same responses that we've received for a number of years, without there being proper engagement as far as that's concerned. I mean, unfortunately, there's been no commitment in terms of a program of dealing with policy issues, and then. I mean, within zero rating specifically, we've seen commitments by the President, by the Minister of Finance. In fact, I mean, a recommendation by this honourable committee, requesting SARS and National Treasury to specifically investigate the exemption. I mean, the expansion of the zero-rated food basket. I mean, there are certainly merit goods that should qualify and that should be considered in the circumstances. And while we acknowledge the concerns of it being a blunt instrument, that impacts across the whole economy, I think with the data that is available now, with artificial intelligence, that we can do that. One could do a very targeted approach in terms of investigating. I mean, the reasons in 2018 when the full extent of the zero rating was not necessarily passed on to that, and certainly in respect of a higher income households, it is very possible to determine what the cost would be in those circumstances, and would recommend that a process be commenced to consider this in more detail, and to consider what is currently relevant to qualify as zero-rated supplies of foodstuffs. Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Divet. My apologies for the earlier interjection. AIDC.
Hello, honourable members, and thank you for the opportunity to give a response, and thank you for the presentations by National Treasury. I am from the Alternative Information and Development Centre. Treasury's view is that tax rebates and PIT tax brackets should be adjusted for inflation, but the tax benefit itself is what diminishes the distributional impact of taxation. Treasury says it needs to balance needs, but the path that is chosen is one that selectively applies austerity on the people most reliant on public services. So if you look at people earning more than 500,000 Rand per year, medical aid tax credits and inflation adjustments to PIT brackets for this group alone is costing 20 billion Rand each year. The medical aid tax credit is regressive because more money is given to holders of private medical aid than SRD recipients who survive on less than 624 Rand per month. There is a real decline in main budget non-interest expenditure of 1%. The emphasis on strict headcount controls at the provincial level in the budget contradict recommendations from this committee that state that in implementing reprioritization measures, government should ensure that core frontline services are protected from real per capita erosion. This budget should be a democratic exercise, and for this to happen, participation should be meaningful. The role that Parliament plays in holding Treasury to account should not be ignored. While in previous years there have been small additions to health and education baselines for frontline services, these allocations seldom result in real per capita growth. For example, between 2025 and 2028, the number of educators and healthcare workers in KwaZulu-Natal will be unchanged. This is the same province that only has one public hospital with a functioning cardiac unit. Real per capita erosions continue despite parliamentary oversight mechanisms, and this is not the only incident that recommendations by the Portfolio Committee have not been adequately addressed. Since inflation in South Africa is supply-side driven, such as through the price of fuel, the narrower inflation target risks harming economic growth. Since the introduction of the narrower inflation target, it has only led to one singular small decrease in the repo rate. With escalating geopolitical tensions and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, further repo rate reductions are unlikely, and the narrower target combined with heightened oil prices will constrain economic growth and therefore worsen the debt to GDP ratio. Given the volatile situation, it is unclear if we will see a stabilization of debt this year. How does Treasury view the narrower inflation target now that inflation expectations have shifted and given the volatile price of fuel? Also, how will, we just want to make a comment on the GPF in the annexure. The GOPF already invests in government bonds. Our proposal involves increasing the demand for government bonds through the GPF. Currently, the PIC invests heavily in financialized industries with little job creation and socioeconomic impact. How will pensions be jeopardized if the GPF is more than fully funded and given that bonds provide above inflation returns? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Saika?
Good morning,
Saika?
Chair. Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning, honourable members, and thank you for the feedback from Treasury and SARS. I think the first is that there are some questions that remain unanswered, and we'll pose them again. Though we hope, like Mr. Chris Axelson said, that there won't be 3 budgets again. From the presentation, and we'll limit our comments to those. I hope I understood correctly. Mr. Sishi noted there were additional annexures. We didn't receive those. So if there are additional annexures to the presentation, if we could receive them. Honourable members, looking at the fiscal framework, we all agree that GDP growth is fundamental there too. And the question we pose, well, is GDP estimates reasonable? 2025, budget 1 and 2 had GDP estimates at 1.9%, and after stakeholders raised concern in budget 3, that was reduced to 1.4. We now know this week, actual growth was 1.1, so even 0.3. So the question remains, is it reasonable to increase GDP growth even if we start from a 20% lower base than we had estimated last year and in the medium term? Importantly, the reason why this is important is because our revenue estimates are elastic, but it embeds inelastic spending plans, which is obviously a high risk to the goals. As to debt, I agree with some of the commentators, debt has not stabilized. The ratio has just slowed a bit in its growth. We are borrowing 1 trillion rand more. And if we look at debt going up 69, we've combined certain things to make it look worse. Health is only going up 20 billion, education 44. As to metrics, I think it is important that we start looking at the embedded metrics in growing the tax base. So the SARS Commissioner noted the illicit economy growing from 800 to 1.2 trillion. What we're not seeing is targets for either Treasury or SARS to say, well, we've addressed this and it's actually shrinking, or this is where we've looked at shrinking it. On SARS, I'll finish off with these 3 comments. We welcome the debt book review and in the next financial year, and we look forward to that. However, from the comments we've made, we've asked for a debt book analysis to see where exactly the money that is collected is coming from, given that it's not a stagnant debt book. It's continually growing month to month. So is it from the most recent debt or from the older debt? And there was also no response as to why and reasons why the disputed debt book has nearly tripled in the last 5 years. So not just the normal debt book. Thank you very much, honourable members. We wait for those responses.
Thank you, Saika. BJC?
Thank you, Chair. Just have a few comments. I think the first is on participation. We believe that the National Treasury has taken part in an extensive pilot. There have been inputs from civil society, from experts. And so we appreciated the invitation to the macro fiscal framework workshop that happened last year, but there were some issues. We received very short notice, I think less than 5 days, for an in-person meeting. Civil society do have responsibilities, and those who can afford to travel need to go through processes and get the necessary approvals to be able to attend. So, you know, the budget calendar is set in advance. I think there's no excuse. There needs to be much better notice. The invitations need to go out sooner, and I think online participation needs to be accommodated. We've also written to the Treasury about the slow responses, and we see in the response today that they'll be providing responses in 6 weeks. So that takes us to about April, but our submissions were sent in September. And we believe that those submissions would inform this 2026 budget. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Also in that workshop, there was no discussion on inflation targeting. We spoke about fiscal anchors and various other reforms, but this was arguably one of the most significant proposals in the budget. And I think it would have been a really good opportunity to raise this as something the Treasury was thinking about for discussion. The other thing is on debt. I think the slides show quite dramatic reduction in debt, leading to improved outcomes. And we just ask, can society afford to wait so long to see improved outcomes? And also noting that, these are quite ambitious, some of the ambitious debt reduction targets. The last is on unemployment. I think given the importance of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment in our submissions, and the comment from Treasury that the public employment programs haven't been reduced, that they're located elsewhere and across sectors. I think that we'd really like to see some better reporting so that we can easily see where these programs are. I think this was a recommendation from this committee last year, and the response from Treasury was that it was up to other departments, but it is impossible for us to find them, to hold those departments accountable. And we believe that Treasury has this information and that they could really include a table or something that would help us to track where the allocations are and make our analysis based on that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Chairperson Maswanganyi, I think we have lost Honorable Ndlovu.
Mangweni, what are you saying?
I think we have lost Honorable Ndlovu.
Oh, okay. Which is the next stakeholder to respond?
It was going to be Sussex, Chair.
Okay, Sussex, are you there?
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Parliament and the Standing and Select Committee on Finance and National Treasury and SARS for today's engagement and the responses provided to our submission. We specifically want to acknowledge the Treasury's response, specifically from Mr. Axelson, regarding the financial literacy crisis facing amongst African youth and the broader South African demographic as well. The acknowledgement of this challenge and the outline of a strategy to begin addressing it is well received by us as SASIC. So we would like to respectfully request that as the strategy is being developed, that SASIC to be consulted as part of that process. We are a national student-led organization with direct reach into the youth demographic as the strategy does serve towards it. And we believe that the voice of the students must be part of shaping any solution designed for them. Thank you for this opportunity, Chair, and we wish everyone the best going forward.
Thanks. Sussex. Honorable Ndlovu, are you back?
Yes, I'm back, Doctor.
Okay, please take the next stakeholder after the students.
Thank you, Doctor. IRR Legal. IR Legal. Dr. Mangweni, do you have them?
Chair, I don't see Mr. Gabriel in the platform.
Better Governance Initiative. I think that is the last stakeholder.
I also do not see them, Chairperson, in the platform.
Okay, thanks very much, members and the stakeholders. I think we are done with the comments from the stakeholders, and we hope that the members and the National Treasury and SARS was able to capture all the comments from the stakeholders. Can we now give opportunity to PBO?
Good morning, honorable members. Our acting director has sent apologies for this meeting. Thank you for providing us the opportunity. Ours is really short to first say and to remind everyone that this budget is in the last years towards the NDP, and we must ask ourselves if this budget is intending to move us any closer. And we already know that most targets will not be met, but the question is on an overall strategic planning and moving forward, where do we peg in terms of that? I think one of the issues that we'd raised in our presentation was why National Treasury has not concluded the discussions about the SRD, and National Treasury had indicated that they would have finalized these discussions in December, so that remains a question. I also want to highlight that even though National Treasury is saying that government spending is increasing, as our colleagues have highlighted, that in nominal terms it's increasing, but we still need to be considering real per capita increases and declines, particularly. And National Treasury also indicates that there are declines as well. So that's important. We do recognize that debt servicing costs have reduced, which we welcome as a share. But also lastly, on tax, honorable members, what we want to highlight is, is it reasonable for South Africa to be compared to the OECD? Most developing countries depend on direct taxes, whereas developed countries depend on indirect taxes. And also in our context of high inequality, poverty, and unemployment, I think it is always important to think about our tax system as a redistributive tool, and what does it look like for us in South Africa specifically. To also then comment on growth, to say that we continue to be concerned by the low projections of growth themselves, and to therefore, which speaks to the budget itself, because the budget is telling us this is our strategy, and yet our growth projection remains low. And lastly, Chairperson, to really highlight again what the PBO has said about the inflation targeting. We had said in the past, and as you can see with the current war in Iran, that external inflationary pressures prove that lower inflation targets cannot anchor inflation expectations at a lower level, and therefore lead to lower interest rates, which the Treasury had argued in the previous budget. And so this is really going to be a test of what it means to lower the inflation target in a geopolitically sensitive world. I will end there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, PBO. Honourable members, I think now is the opportunity for the honourable members to...
Hi, Chair.
Yeah.
BGI is here now.
BGI.
Yes.
BGI, in 2 minutes, please. Comment.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Apologies, I did not hear us being called on. Might have been a network thing. But good morning to yourself and the Honourable Minister and all honourable members and everybody else present. Chair, we note and appreciate Treasury's thoughtful and rigorous response. And just to remind us, what BGI had proposed was a specific moderate reallocation for the local government equitable share, moving from 9.4 to 10.9%, apologies. And this was in light of the SALGA and COCTA study on the unfunded mandates expenditure and the impact on core municipal services. So the targeted correction, and we submit, Chair, that this is critical for Parliament to be able to decide, if it is persuaded by our submission, on what to do about adopting or amending the framework. We note, Chair, that Treasury's response appears to be that this may be undesirable in this moment in light of the LGFF and the white paper processes. And I want to emphasize that we support those processes, but our concern is about the current crisis engulfing local government. And with respect, then, we submit that desirability is Parliament to determine, i.e., is this current situation desirable? If it is not, or if it is, that's the end of the inquiry. If it is not, then what can Parliament do about it? And if Parliament wants to do something about it, what information is required? We have not seen in the response, Chair, with respect, specific responses on these elements. The impact, as we submit that this can be done within a net neutral in a net neutral reallocation within the envelope. We have not seen a response on that. And we would ask Chairperson that Mr. Sishe, as he had indicated, that Treasury is keen to provide any further supplementary submissions in light of this conversation, that information would empower Parliament to make an informed decision on what it is to do about the framework and the further processes that then follow. Other than that, Chairperson, we stand by our proposals and our recommendations, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chalufu. Members, I think now is the time for the honourable members to ask questions and also to comment if there is any. I see Honourable Ryder. Honourable, can you start, Honourable Ryder? I'm noting the hands.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning to everybody. Yes, it's been a fairly intensive meeting with a comprehensive response from SARS and Treasury, and we appreciate that. But I do think as well that the robust engagement between the civil society and Treasury, with ourselves obviously in the mix as well, is really appreciated. I think this results in a really good interaction. As I've said before, sometimes you won't see immediate adjustments based on your inputs, but you certainly will see that your inputs will be contained in our report. That report is responded to fully by Treasury and always forms part of the next budget review document. And hopefully influences policy over time. So thank you to all of the presenters, and if you feel like you haven't won your battle today or in the past couple of weeks, please don't be defeated. These things do take time to filter through. That's the first point that I wanted to make, Chairperson. The next point I wanted to make is just perhaps something Ms. Higginson referred to, and that's the timing and the programming of Treasury's engagements with civil society and with other interest groups as well, including SELGA and the provinces, etc. And I think that correct planning and proper planning of your calendar is going to be really useful, and so that we can get optimal inputs from civil society. Because I think the quality of a number of the inputs over the last week or so have indicated that there are really good ideas emanating out of civil society and people that are trained certainly far better than members of Parliament who have some ideas to throw into the mix. So I do think that is something important. Chairperson, I think we'll have more time to interrogate these matters as we compile our report across the committees. But I am reluctant to allow this opportunity to slide without addressing something which is quite important. And I do think that many of the inputs have come around geopolitical issues happening now. We have got a tremendous spike in the oil price. We've seen the dollar on a rampant charge, and the South African rand losing some strength against that, certainly not because of our own fundamentals. But Chairperson, is there anything that Treasury can help us with or advise us in terms of cushioning South Africans from the inevitable short-term blip in or spike, let's call it a spike, the short-term spike in the fuel price that is going to hurt South Africa and our economy and probably our growth prospects as well? If we can just get a comment on, are there any initiatives being discussed? I know it's not necessarily part of the fiscal framework, but it is something that South Africans need to hear right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of Chairs. Honourable Sisa.
No, thank you, Chair. I hope my network is not going to fail me, Chair. But let me get the Chair. Mine is more of a response, and maybe there's a question in between, but I'm not sure. So National Treasury is saying that they are willing to, according to the President, to establish a national illicit economic disruption program. At what cost is this going to happen? instead of enforcing legislations, Chair, is National Treasury stating that it will be costly to administer and it's very difficult tax authorities to enforce when it comes to wealth tax. Further states that with a reference to international experience, Chairperson, shows that wealth tax delivers little revenue. Might the reasons not be that most of their wealth is here in South Africa? Thus, it will have little impact in those international countries, and that certain international states do not have access to the wealth of some of these individuals that are actually have investments in South Africa. So National Treasury is saying to us today, National Chairperson, that they are willing to spend to establish a program, but they are not willing to spend for collection of revenue through the wealth tax. Spending what we don't have is not a solution, Chairperson, but we need to spend where we will be able to put in and administer laws that will address the inequalities that we are facing in South Africa, which means that National Treasury, including SARS, they need to make sure that we actually at some point do implement the wealth tax to be able to address the inequalities in South Africa. Coming to the DORA chairperson of the session, additional funding outside the project does not address the matter of relooking at the equation used for different provinces. National Treasury needs to relook and speed up the process so that a consistent equation is utilized for determination of the PES. Additional funds outside of the PES is not a consistent or a constant amount, as it may be affected by inflation as the years go on. Chairperson, the issue of distress in municipalities, and this is a comment, it's because of the instability and the change in political dynamics. So at some point, municipalities need to put forward the interest of their residents instead of trying to score political, other than to deal with politics which are not going to benefit our people. The issue of infrastructure funds for infrastructure allocated. I want to check with National Treasury the involvement of private sector with reference to the PPP. What percentage will the private sector interject in infrastructure? And this question, Chairperson, comes from the reference that was made by the Deputy President in the NCOP during our question and answer, where the Deputy President alluded that there are private sectors that have already interjected into the issue of infrastructure, particularly when it comes to the railroad. So when we speak about PPPs, Chairperson, how much are we speaking? What percentage is National Treasury expecting from the private sector to interject into the budget, especially when we deal with infrastructure in South Africa? Those will be my only comments and questions for now, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Sibisa. Dr. Beck, yes.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are mainly to Treasury, but it does interweave some content from the public participation process. The first question is on PPPs. It seems from page 40 that there are 63 PPP projects at different stages of development, which is 17 projects in the inception phase, 32 in the feasibility study phase, and 14 in the procurement stage. And I just want to make sure that my understanding is accurate, that none of them are currently in the build phase, or is that counted separately somewhere else? It's mostly a question on clarity. On page 44 on ghost workers, it says that preliminary, and I quote, preliminary work is underway to determine whether the ghost worker audit can be replicated at local government level. Now, if we had about 5,000 ghost workers at the local government level earning in the vicinity of 400,000 rand, that would be a 2 billion rand expense item. And so my question is, can you give us a firm timeline on when you expect to make some progress, perhaps a bit more concrete than preliminary work? And then my final question, Chairperson, is in response to the left field suggestion by the AIDC that the GEPF should primarily invest in government bonds. And National Treasury says, and I quote, "The GEPF has a strict legal obligation to protect the retirement savings of public servants. Forcing the fund into these investments to subsidize state debt could compromise the fund's long-term solvency." Now, firstly, I think on this issue I agree with Treasury, but I wonder how we can say on the one hand that the GEPF's strict legal obligation is to protect retirement savings, and then on the other hand, we have the GEPF continuing to invest money via the Isabaya Fund, which has returned 1.43% a year for the last decade, and that figure itself might be optimistic. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave my questions there for now.
Thank you, Mr. Honorable Sekwati.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, just to welcome the responses of the National Treasury and the SARS. Particularly, it's also encouraging to hear stakeholders being, happy in terms of the direction that we are heading, particularly with the responses that they are getting from a National Treasury, meaning that we are getting closer and closer in terms of, realizing what the stakeholders are actually bringing to the fore in terms of contributions. Chair, let me start with the issue that Dr. Berg has already raised in terms of the buying of bonds, which is at 29% for assets that are allocated to buying bonds. Now, I wanted to check as to how far can the national, the buying of assets or allocation of assets in terms of buying bonds, and does it mean that that it's an actual risk? Because I really want to understand where the risk is actually coming from in terms of buying the state bonds from the GPF assets. And secondly, Chair, is in terms of the fiscal rules in slide 20, where National Treasury is saying that the fiscal plan, which is linked to the term of office of government, is practically constraining. I want to understand, because this is a problem statement, as to what does it seek to achieve. Does it need new legislation? What does it really refer to? Yeah, I think those are my questions, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Sekwati. Dr. Masangani, do you have a question?
Not necessarily, just to acknowledge the work that is done by Treasury and led by the minister, the two deputy ministers, and the management, and also SARS, and acknowledge that there's been a lot of progress, which has been reported by the minister to the public through his budget speech, whereby the budget, the economic outlook has improved, and the public finances have reached an important milestone. And the economy is growing at 1.6%, expecting it to grow at 2% in the next 2 years. and stabilizing the debt ratio, which has always been a challenge. All the reports of SCOF, one of the items that comes very high or prominent in those reports is the issue of debt stabilization. So we are quite happy about or the direction that Treasury is taking to stabilize debt and the declining inflation. I think I don't have a question to ask. I want to make just a comment. I think what we have to do, Chair, we must create space with the Minister, SARS, BMA, and other law enforcement agencies to deal with this thing of counterfeit goods, which are all over our country, and the illicit trade. Because that's what is also killing the economy. We can't allow people to come from their own countries, come with goods which cannot be accounted for. They are not paying tax, and we think it's business as usual. We have been to Durban Harbour, OR Tambo, and Musina. We'll still have to compile and adopt the report in what we have come across there. Be that as it may, I think before that report goes to Parliament, it will be important that we have a full day session with Treasury, SARS, and structures or agencies which are part of the law enforcement, so that we deal with the scientific part of uprooting this cancer that is eating our economy and find a solution that is sustainable. Because if we don't deal with it now, it's going to create problem for generations to come. It will reach a stage where the mafias take over the economy. So that's the issue that I wanted to comment about, Chairperson. The issue of what's happening in the Middle East, and I think at some stage we'll also have to deal with that, because we are part of the global village, part of the global economy. I think you have seen what the airlines are doing this week. They've issued notices that the airfares are increasing as a result of challenges of what do you call it, jet fuel. So it's going to have a serious impact once we have a lack of supply of oil, gas, and so on and so on. But prominent to what I'm suggesting, Chair, is the issue of discussing the challenges of illicit trade that is becoming a cancer to our economy. We have to take it out by whatever means which is legal in the interest of South Africans. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I see the hand of Honorable Van Ryn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought that I was not going to make inputs because we think that the purpose of the meeting in the May is to accord stakeholders an opportunity to obviously have a weight on the response from National Treasury. And I think we have engaged in the previous meetings on their submission, and also with National Treasury jointly on their submission. So my submission is triggered by the comment made by the chair, but also by Honorable Ryder. As NK Party, We have even submitted a question for written reply to the president, specifically trying to establish what is our plan, maybe or in response to the shifting geopolitical dynamics, because we are extremely worried as everybody of the impact of what is happening to our economy, but also to majority of the poorest people of our society. Because as we all know, if diesel prices are affected or fuel prices are affected, that has a transversal impact on the lives of our poor people. So definitely we are interested, and we are also considering to have a snap debate in Parliament on the same matter. And it will be interesting to hear if there's anything from the side of National Treasury that it's being considered. But also, Chair, maybe as my short, I want to check, because I hear the chairperson, Ramason, say the economy is growing at 1.6%. I'm not sure if you're referring to the South African economy. Was he referring to the projections that have been made, the what you call the fashionable projections that have been made by because the economy is not growing at 6%. Hello.
Honorable Des? Honorable Van Rooyen? I see you're muted. I'm not sure. Or
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yes, I'm done, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because I heard there was another noise on your background. I'm not sure it is mine or yours. Okay, it's fine. No, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, you're traveling. Okay. No, thanks very much, honorable members. That is the comment from honorable members. So, and then I will, before I close the meeting, hand over to the National Treasury and the SARS to respond to the honorable members' comments and questions. Thank you. Mr. Sishi and team, I'm not sure who's going to start first.
Chair, I can. Sorry, Chair, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, there have been, for some reason, connectivity problems today.
Yes.
Yeah, look, Chair, I think, there's 12 minutes left in the meeting. So I think other colleagues can come in, but for my part, let me just go through a couple of things. First of all, I just want to make the point that perhaps there's a conflation of the point that we were making with respect to the GEPF, honorable members, is that the GEPF makes decisions on investment on its own. GEPF, PIC, and so forth, they have their own investment committees, and we don't interfere in their investment decisions. So if it happens that they buy government bonds or buy other kinds of assets, or invest in equities or whatever other kind of securities, this is their decision, and is incidental to the facts of their own independence. So I think the point of emphasis there was not that the GEPF shouldn't or wouldn't buy government bonds. They would if they wanted to, but the point is that we don't tell the GEPF what to invest in. They have an exclusive legal mandate that they execute for the purposes of complying with that legal mandate. And that's the point. Whether they buy or not buy, or the amount that they buy, is an asset selection decision that they make on their own. Secondly, Chair, we take the points with respect to the public participation process and the consultation, and the calendar and so forth. We note that and we appreciate that. I must say that it's obviously a challenge in that there are some decisions in the budget process that are made at different points. So, for example, you could have a public participation meeting at a point when a decision has not been made, and that's early, or you could have a public participation process at a point where you do have things on the table, but then that's late. So, we just have to balance in that regard. But Chair, broadly, we 100% agree. We want to improve the process. We are definitely going to look at the calendar and do better as we go along. And we want to do that, and we accept that. Chair, there were other questions raised on the tax and financial sector area. So I'm going to ask Chris maybe to comment on that. Chris?
Thank you, Edgar. Thanks, Honourable Chair. There are a couple of comments. I think we will note quite a few of the comments based on illicit trade in alcohol, both the role that excise duties play in terms of reducing harmful use, as well as the impact on the illicit market, and we've spoken quite a lot about that. We will take those away. There was a point about the questions from Winsome Africa from SMME incentives. I know there were two proposals there that they were specifically asking for. The one was a tax holiday for SMMEs in the first year. The other one was for tax advantaged savings for SMMEs. As I noted earlier, we can go away and look at those two. We won't provide answers here today, but they can be part of the tax proposals that are sent to us that we can investigate further. There was some disappointment that the proposals put to us today are not implemented, and they've been put forward to us over the last few years. For example, the zero rating of chicken. I'd just like to say, we do look at these issues. We've discounted, we've said no in these sort of presentations and in these types of meetings. Just because a proposal gets put forward year after year after year doesn't mean we necessarily will agree after a particular number of years. And we've been giving a consistent response there, but we can potentially engage if we need to. The only thing is, Chair and honourable members, it is difficult to have a one-on-one engagement with particular individuals or companies who put forward tax proposals. We get a multitude of tax proposals that are sent to us, and we don't usually meet taxpayers on an individual basis to discuss these proposals. But if there is a need and the committee would like us to, of course we can. I think SARS can respond on the debt book. And I'm happy to hear the comments about the financial education funding. The point about from the PBO that the OECD isn't comparable. The reason we use the OECD here is because it actually strengthens our case. As the PBO mentioned, most developing economies rely on indirect taxes. So we use the OECD, who rely much more on direct taxes, personal income tax and corporate tax, to show that we are even at the top end and almost the highest level amongst OECD countries. So we really are an outlier, especially amongst developing economies, in terms of how much tax we get from personal income tax and corporate income tax, and not from other indirect taxes such as customs duties and VAT. We also note the points on the wealth tax, and we can go away and consider those points that are made today. We've got a view that we've put forward that we've been consistent with, but we are happy to revisit and look at them again. I think that covers everything from our side. There was one point about measures for the geopolitical impact, but I think those I don't think we'd be able to comment on those today. Thank you.
Thank you, and good day, honourable members and all partners on the public platform. Let me just make a few quick points. The first is on the debt book analysis. It is work that we do, so we will happily share that with Parliament and also make it available to stakeholders. What I would like to ask is that SARS has a comprehensive compliance program, not just focusing on debt, but on ensuring that all taxes that are collected. And the measure of efficiency is what we publish every year, which is tax buoyancy. And our commitment and aspiration is to ensure that that tax buoyancy is at least at or above 1, which is the ultimate indicator of the efficient extraction of taxes. I want to also just mention on the illicit economy, I welcome the interest by Parliament and stakeholders. And just to say that the SARS 5-point plan that has been referred to, we are engaging the presidency, believing that it must be presidency-led because of the multi-agency implication. And I can report that on Wednesday this week, we had a very productive meeting with all the frontline agencies, as well as agencies that are connected to it, as well as the business sector. And I am persuaded that if we commit to the overall spirit and agreement, we should be able to see us making more progress in the illicit and criminal economy. Those are the comments on SARS. Just more generally, I think what is really required as a whole of government, led by Treasury, but also with parliamentary oversight, is we need a first principles review of our capital allocation takes place and use a very strict business-like measure of the return on such investment. Obviously, not all the returns are financial. Some of the returns are social, but to not do that will never give us the assurance that we're getting the return on the capital that we allocate. And one of the proposals we have specifically made for the 5-point plan is that we dilute our effort and our capital by making it available to departments and not to comprehensive projects. So we have made a strong proposal, for example, that we go and fix the Lubombo border post and the Mozambique-South African borderline, determine what it will cost us, and then all agencies work together to fix something specific so that when we walk away from it, we know that there's a real return on such an investment. And we would encourage that such an approach be followed more broadly. Thank you, honourable members, and thank you. We welcome the comments and the continued engagement with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for coming through. Because I'm also looking at on the platform here. Don't see Honourable Maute because Tate Makul has to account on your whereabouts earlier. Thank you very much for coming through. Honourable members, that is the response from the National Treasury and the SARS. And I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Let me take this opportunity to thank, maybe before that, I'd like to emphasize the issue that was raised by Honourable Masongane on the issue of meeting with the minister, the 2 ministers and the deputy ministers of the police and the minister, our minister of finance, with regard to the counterfeit goods and the illicit trade, which is very key, that you need to make sure that we got our economy. So that thing does not only impact, has an impact to one person or certain political party. All of us as a collective, we need to emphasize that point. And we hope that Honourable Minister will take the message to the Honourable Minister of Police to say, let's check the date in terms of our diaries. When can we meet with the committees, both of us, the select committee and the standing committee? With that, honourable members, let me take this opportunity to thank Honourable Minister and the 2 ministers who were able to be part of us and listening to the responses, to the stakeholders, to the honorable members, and the stakeholders present here, the commissioner and your team, the commissioner and the deputy commissioner. We are saying thank you very much for availing yourself. We know that it is Friday today. It's very much important that we take the issues of our stakeholders, the matters of our stakeholders raised very serious, the responses. We don't have time for other things. It is very much key, and we thank you for participating for today's session. Also to our staff from the National Assembly and the Select Committee, we'd like to say thank you very much for availing yourself and also making sure that this platform is created for all the stakeholders to participate. Thank you very much, our stakeholders. We love you all, and they say the meeting stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.